There's a question quietly circulating among people who follow the Toronto Blue Jays every single day. Not in the headlines, not in the polished spring training interviews, but in the behind-the-scenes conversations among fans who understand exactly how an elite rotation works. The question is simple and at the same time uncomfortable. If the Blue Jays rotation is as full as it looks, someone is inevitably going to be the odd man out. And in recent weeks, one name has started to appear with a frequency that makes a lot of people in Toronto a little uneasy. Jose Berrios. Yes, the same Berrios who was once treated as a central piece of this rotation. The same Berrios who signed a massive contract to be part of the backbone of the team. But now there's a possibility being discussed in league circles. A simulated trade that would send Berrios to the St. Louis Cardinals. And when you take a closer look at the details, the idea starts to feel less absurd. In fact, it begins to look dangerously logical. The starting point of this story is a problem that almost every Major League Baseball team would love to have. Too many pitchers. Right now, the Toronto Blue Jays project something very few clubs can sustain. A six-man rotation. And that completely changes the internal math of the roster. Because when you start listing the names, the situation becomes clear very quickly. Kevin Gausman, Dylan Cease, Trey Yesavage. Those three names already appear as pillars of the current rotation. And Yesavage, especially, carries a kind of expectation that makes executives think twice before blocking space for young talent. He's a promising rookie, the arm that could still grow inside the organization. And when a prospect reaches that point, the clock starts ticking. But almost no one talks about an important detail here. The Blue Jays don't only have those three. The organization also controls four of the club's top 12 pitching prospects at AAA Buffalo. 4. That's not just depth, that's structural pressure. Because each one of those arms represents future innings, opportunities development. And every time a veteran occupies a rotation spot, someone in the system is waiting another year, waiting for another opening, until the organization eventually has to make a decision. And that's where Berrios' name starts entering the conversation. Now, let's face the point that really carries weight. The contract. Berrios will cost $19 million in 2026. And after that, $24 million per season in 2027 and 2028. 3 years of heavy financial commitment for a pitcher who today appears in the best case scenario as a mid-rotation arm. Not the number one, not the dominant arm who defines a playoff series. Just solid. And solid for $24 million a year is exactly the type of decision modern front offices analyze under a microscope, especially when a team is trying to keep a World Series window open. Yes, because that's another part of this story. The Blue Jays enter 2026 trying to repeat something Canadian fans still feel deeply. A deep October run. This roster was built to compete, to win now. And when a team reaches that stage, every dollar on the payroll needs to create direct impact, not just stability. Impact. Now hold on for a second, because there's a detail here that completely changes the tone of this conversation. This simulated trade isn't just about shedding a contract. It brings names back to Toronto. The projected package includes 3 pieces coming from the Cardinals: Jordan Walker, Michael McGreevy, and a round B pick in the 2026 draft. Suddenly, the trade stops being purely financial. It becomes roster strategy. Starting with Walker, the outfielder isn't viewed as an offensive superstar in the league, at least not right now. But there's a specific kind of value that modern analysts love. Walker ranks among the top 10% of MLB hitters in 2 specific metrics: exit velocity and bat speed. That means real power, raw strength, the kind of contact that can leave the stadium or turn into an extra base hit at the perfect moment. And on a team trying to win tight October games, a bench bat with real power can become a strategic weapon. A pinch hitter in a high-pressure situation. One swing, immediate impact. Those types of players often decide short playoff series. Then comes Michael McGreevy, a pitcher who, within this logic, would function as rotation depth, not necessarily to jump straight into the top of the staff, but as a reliable arm within the system. And here's the quiet point of this trade. The Blue Jays wouldn't be trading pitching for offense. They'd be redistributing depth, less money tied to a veteran, more controllable arms inside the organization, more flexibility. Flexibility that could turn into another trade mid-season. Flexibility that could become bullpen help. Flexibility that could become a deadline move. This is competitive window management. But there's another side to this story, and it takes place in St. Louis. The Cardinals enter 2026 with a very different expectation than Toronto. While the Jays are thinking about October, the Cardinals project a season that is, let's say, more modest. They're not in a full rebuild, but they're also not among the league's favorites. So why would they make this deal? The answer is a word the franchise values a lot: stability. Berrios is exactly the type of pitcher teams in that stage look for. A veteran capable of throwing 180 innings or more. That's not glamorous, but it's survival for a bullpen. Every long outing from a starter reduces the wear on the rest of the staff. And for a team trying to stay competitive without collapsing, that has enormous value, especially considering another recent change in the Cardinals roster. The loss of Miles McCullough's left a gap of experience in the rotation. Berrios would fill that space immediately. No adjustment period. No gamble. Just a steady presence every 5 days. But there's a third reason one few people mention, and it's very pragmatic. If Berrios arrives in St. Louis and pitches well, he becomes a trade asset. The Cardinals could easily flip him near the deadline if they decide to look toward 2027. In other words, for them, the risk is relatively low. They trade young depth for an arm who can stabilize the season or generate future return. It's the kind of calculated bet several franchises make. Now comes the question that really matters for Toronto. Does this trade actually improve the Blue Jays? Or does it simply rearrange the pieces? Because the truth, plain and simple, is that Berrios is still a useful pitcher. He's not a problem in the rotation. He's not dead weight. So the decision wouldn't be about performance. It would be about structural efficiency. A team with 6 starters, prospects pushing for opportunities, and a high contract sitting in the middle of the rotation. That creates a dilemma. Either you keep veteran depth, or you open the door for the next generation. And every choice carries risk, because prospects, even the promising ones, are still unknown. But this is where the conversation gets interesting. Blue Jays fans have learned something over the past few years. Prospects aren't just distant hope. They can turn into immediate impact. And when a rookie like Trey Yesavich shows up with high potential, the team has to decide whether it truly believes in that future, or if it keeps veterans blocking the path. That decision defines the direction of many franchises. And if you look around the league, moves like this are happening more and more often. Competitive teams trading expensive veterans to create financial and structural room. Not because the player is bad, but because the roster evolved, because the cycle changed, because new pieces emerged, and modern baseball demands constant adaptation. So let's summarize the situation brutally honestly. If this trade happened, Toronto would free up a heavy contract, open space for younger arms, gain offensive depth and another pitcher in the system, and still add a draft pick. St. Louis would gain immediate stability in the rotation, a veteran capable of throwing a lot of innings, and a potential future trade asset. No one gets fleeced. No one wins in an absurd way. It's a trade of balance. But the final question still echoes among fans in Toronto. Has Berrios truly become expendable? Because that says a lot about the Blue Jays' current stage. A team that no longer depends on a single arm to carry the rotation. A team that now has to make cold decisions, even when they involve important players. And maybe that's the real sign of a franchise's maturity. When the conversation stops being emotional and becomes structural. Even if that means imagining Berrios wearing a different uniform. Now I want to hear from you, who follow Jay's Fan Report. If this proposal actually landed on the front office desk in Toronto, would you make this trade? Or would you keep Berrios as part of the rotation while the World Series chase continues? Because one thing is certain, that decision, if it ever comes, will completely divide the Blue Jays fan base.